The need to create seems to push artists forward. This overwhelming compulsion to make things, this excitement that pulls us from sleep in the middle of the night or keeps us from falling asleep in the first place, is ever present. Whatever the reason, creative people must create. But how do we handle this? How do we deal with a compulsion not shared by our human brethren? And why do we have it in the first place? Well, what do we mean by managing the need to create? Well, this need is twofold. First of all, it is the managing of the psychological need and desire to make and bring new things into existence. And the second of these is that it is a managing of time and the physical need of the artwork. In this episode, we will be focusing on the first of these, the psychological need to create. In another, perhaps the next episode, I will explore the managing of time and the physical realities of art management. If you would like to see that episode, please let me know in the comments. So why does the need to create exist? Well, perhaps it comes from an innate creativity, some component of the personality of the artist or creator. Perhaps the flowing creativity needs a place to go. Perhaps it's a quirk of your personality, my personality, or some weird conglomeration of nature and nurture. Expression is another potential option, and perhaps it is the most effective way for many of us to communicate. Sometimes art gives us an effective way to say the things that we want to say, where words seem to fall short. You see this a lot with people working through trauma or difficulties in their life via poetry or art in many of its forms. This is, of course, a very common thing, and we as humans have done it since time immemorial, and it occurs in many different ways. For some of us, we must create because it's a manner of processing. Creating can be a fantastic way to work through things, to understand the world around you. This is perhaps most traditionally understood through therapy and trauma responses, working through difficult things, but can also be used as a method for working through smaller traumas, the difficulty of home life, middle school, or interpersonal stress at work. Sometimes a story or a piece of art more accurately represents what you feel than our vocabulary can hope to achieve, just like I mentioned earlier. And maybe we just don't know. For all of our vast knowledge as the human race and all of these potential explanations, the human brain, and especially human dreams, desires, and consciousness itself are still beyond our ultimate understanding. So one of these reasons might pertain to you. It may not, but it seems indisputable that some humans have an innate need to create. In education, obviously a secular realm, they referred to it as the creator instinct, an innate need for human beings to leave something behind, children, a legacy, or a piece of artwork. Many religions, of course, answer this in similar fashion. We were created, and therefore we have the need to emulate our creator, to make things of our own. Well, why is it important to manage our need to create, to take the reins, as it were? There are so many ugly things that can get in our way when it comes to our need to create. The goblins like perfectionism, the fear of failure, creative blocks, procrastination, burnout, overthinking, and I could go on and on, unfortunately. In the shadow of these obstacles, we can begin to feel like we will never be able to achieve our potential. We can feel like we are stagnating, like we are making no forward progress. Frustration looms over us. We can lose our passion. We can regress. We can be filled with regret. And we can find ourselves filled with a sense of unfulfillment. All of these terrible things wait in the shadows when we resist the need to create, when we don't manage it correctly. They want to strangle us, or perhaps it's just their nature. Water, after all, doesn't want to drown anyone, but when you find yourself without a buoy or a life jacket in the middle of the ocean, that's what happens. So what is the life jacket for the artist who must manage this need to create, adrift in the vast ocean of the creative world? What can we do about it? Don't fight this need. Realize that it is a part of your nature, your human artistic nature, and work on getting to know your whole self. One of the biggest reasons I made this channel and I record these podcasts is to provide the potential for artists to hear this and to feel validated. You feel a little strange because you have the need to create? There are others like you. You struggle with things that people around you don't understand. That's okay. Thousands of other people have experienced those same things. You are not broken or weird. You're just a different kind of human, perhaps. So don't fight this part of your nature. Understand that it's a piece of you, there's nothing wrong with it, and it needs to be acknowledged. Once you do that, you can start to move forward. You can start to rationally pull apart who you are and how you want to proceed with your life. I start with this point because perhaps it's the key to everything else. To understand that this is a part of who you are, to recognize that, to acknowledge it, in some cases to come to terms with it, is probably the first thing that you need to do. If you don't take that step, if you don't understand that you need to create, that's a part of who you are as a person, and then begin to pull that apart and logically try to think about what that means for how you structure your life and how you interpret things, you're probably going to be just treading water in that proverbial ocean. For me, it was never very difficult to wrap my head around the fact that I have to make things. I've always had enough years of experience looking back going, well, this is just something I've always done. And I've given myself enough grace, or at least enough logical understanding, that this must be something that's important to me. Maybe it's important to me psychologically, maybe it's a part of my nature. I don't really know. I have ideas and concepts, but I'm not sure that we as humans are ever going to be 100% capable of dissecting that and understanding it. All that it comes down to at the end of the day is I understand that I have this innate need to create. And then extrapolating from that, I know that I am not the only human that is this way. I've grown up with others. I have others who are in my life. I taught many for years. So if that's the case, then there must be, at the very least, a subset of humans who have this need. And again, whether it comes from nature, from nurture, from trauma, or something else doesn't really matter. It's the understanding that you need. It's the validation of understanding that this is just a piece of who you are and you have to push forward. And some of us need to come to terms with that. Some of us have to wrap our heads around the fact that we are different. It's okay. In fact, it's probably better and more interesting, because if we were all the same, it'd be so lame. And I mean, just to toot our own horns for a second, most of the cool things that we endure in life and the cool things that we run into are all devised by artists. Creative minds are what make our lives intriguing. Now, they sometimes do make sleep difficult. They make us overanalyze and overthink things, so they have their deficits. But by and large, I think it's a beautiful thing, a beautiful gift maybe, or a beautiful curse. I don't really know. But again, I think the first thing you have to do to move forward, to manage this need to create, is understand that you have it. And then understand that you're not the only one that does, and then come to terms with that in whatever way you need to psychologically. Perhaps the next best thing to do is to prioritize this time, prioritize your need to create. Set a routine or build a schedule. Again, this is going to stem from the understanding that it's okay and that it's necessary. And then I think, like most things in our life that are okay or necessary, we schedule them, we build time in for them. I don't like exercising, for example. I don't like working out. I do it almost every day, except for days like the last couple after I broke a toe, because that makes working out hard. But I try to schedule time for that, not because I like it, but because it's important. It keeps me in shape, it keeps my lungs functioning well, and it helps me keep up with my 4-year-old who runs around like nobody's business and somebody needs to run after her. So set a routine, set a schedule time for you to sit down and create things and to be productive. Keep your studio space clean, whatever form it takes. If you just work at your dining room table, just make sure there's always a space cleaned. Make sure things are prepped for work. Clean or messy, whatever it is you need for working, just make sure it's ready for your explorations and make sure that there's time set aside for that. Sometimes this means make sure there's time set aside, like with your family. If you're married or you have a partner of some kind, or you're young and you live in a house with a whole bunch of other people, try to find ways to schedule that time. Sometimes just mentioning to your parents, like, hey, it's really important that I do this. Can I have like a half an hour of free time a day or an hour of free time every other day to do this? Whatever form that might take, just prioritize it. Understand that it's important for you and that most people in your life will probably value that. Not everybody, unfortunately, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So try to schedule this time, try to prioritize your need to create. And when you sit down with this scheduled time, reevaluate your goals frequently. Make sure your goals are realistic, they're relevant to what you want to achieve. And if you don't think you have goals, you don't have desires, think long and hard. I am unsure if we are truly capable of doing a thing without some manner of goal. Even if your perspective is simply, I want to explore and have fun, that's a goal. Fortunately, with a goal like that, it's pretty simply to assess and figure out if you've been successful. In fact, success is a pretty easy thing to achieve. You need to analyze yourself. You need to understand what it is that you desire. A lot of us have a tendency to dive into our art, whatever form that takes, and not really think about why we're doing it. But if we're honest with ourselves, if we truly sit down and think for just a couple minutes, we all have goals, ambitions, and desires. Often, we don't vocalize these because it makes us feel arrogant or it sets us up for failure in our own minds. We feel like if I say that I really want to make a comic and then I've said that out loud, people have heard me say that, or even I've heard myself say that, now I can fail. Now others will be aware that I failed. It becomes more real in that sense. And if you really think about it, that's kind of silly, right? If you have a goal and you're just keeping it internally and you don't want anybody to know about it, even yourself, it still exists. Like, it still gnaws at you. It still wakes you up in the middle of the night. It still, plays in the back of your brain when you should be listening to the lecture in whatever class you're sitting in. So just being aware of those things, being honest with yourself about your goals and your ambitions, and maybe even writing them down or vocalizing them will be a beneficial thing to you. This is what I have done in the past. Get out a piece of paper and think. If everything worked out beautifully in 5 years, what would you like to have accomplished artistically? Where would you like to be? Try to be reasonable, not from beginner to pro, but from wherever you are now to somewhere reasonable in 5 years. Writing those things down makes them feel manageable, understandable, discernible. When they're written down, you're able to look at them and see if they actually make sense, if there's something that is reasonable for you to chew on, to think about, to process. Once you can see them, start working backward and understand what that implies for 2 years from now, for 1 year from now, for 6 months. Mostly, this puts as much control in your hands as possible. It gives you the ability to manage something difficult, to get a handle on a complicated issue. Try to seek community as well. The older I get, the more I begin to understand the importance of community. I am an introvert, and quite one at that. Even though it took me many months of working from home during 2020, I eventually got to the point where I needed feedback on my work, I needed community, and I needed friends to laugh with again. I've mentioned this before, so I won't belabor it, but this is much easier to do if you are younger or in school. If you are older, seek out local groups, classes you can take online, Discord communities, and things like this. I am a member of 2 such Discord communities where artists have the ability to post work and communicate with one another. Those servers belong to Trent Kaniga and Hardy Fowler. Both are largely digital focused, but there are likely many more like them. In the near future, I will hopefully get one built as well for that same purpose, for community, for you guys, for myself to be able to post art and get some feedback on it, and then also just to, write about and rant about your issues, the things that you're concerned with. Sometimes it's as simple as, I don't feel like creating today, and then somebody else can chime in and go, yeah, me too, most days, I push through it, please push through it, you'll feel better. Those kind of things are really good and really productive for us. And it can be very difficult as an adult to get that kind of feedback, get that kind of interest and commentary on what it is that you're doing. And try to treat yourself well as you move through all of this. Try to celebrate your little wins. So one of the biggest things here is just to tell people when you have success. When you finish a piece you like, tell someone who cares, even if it's your mom and she doesn't really understand art all that much, but she's very encouraging. That's great. Taking care of yourself is a huge part of making art, and this goes back to understanding that your need to create is valid. It's understandable. It's just a part of who you are. We have a tendency to not be very kind to ourselves. We have a tendency to push outward and to look at all of the inputs that come toward us and not really analyze and think about ourselves and what we need. Something as simple as celebrating your little successes, a finished sketchbook, a successful piece, is really fundamental and is a beautiful thing. If you share your successes with people, it floats out of you and other people share that feeling. It's like the opposite of what happens when you're struggling and you tell other people and it helps share that load. Perhaps in this case, you are creating repositories of excess positive thought about your work that can be mined later. These are things that you can go find. Another part of this about treating yourself well is self-care. That podcast came out recently, so if you want more information on artist self-care, go check that out. Aim to know yourself, to know what it is that you need, what your brain needs, and know what makes you tick, what is beneficial to you in particular. If you really don't know the answers to these kinds of questions, spend some time thinking, spend some time analyzing yourself. That will never be wasted time. Aristotle said that the unexamined life is not worth living, and I think this is exactly what he's talking about, is it's really not to your benefit as a human being in general to not think about why you do what you do and what drives you. In this particular arena, I think it also extends though. The unexamined artistic life is not worth pursuing. So look at what you do, look at what you want to do, look at what your dreams are, your ambitions, and analyze them. Try to wrap your head around them and understand why. The more you understand about yourself, the easier it is to take good care of yourself, to understand that these are your needs. We're all different. I really wish that I could be a little bit more specific here, but it's very, very difficult. I'm trying to think about some instances over the years that I have encountered. For myself, the taking care of myself and being kind to myself when it comes to artistic things is really just making sure that I have fun things to do. I make sure that I have media to play with that is entertaining. A lot of my work with brush pens, including one of the recent videos that came out, is just, I work with the brush pens because they're fun. I don't know that they're nearly as productive as some of my other artwork. I think that probably putting time into oil painting and digital work would be the most productive thing from a financial standpoint. But the brush pens are fun. Ink is fun. I put time into those because they keep me working. They keep skills developing. And then when I do things that are easier to sell or they're more productive for teaching classes and stuff like that, I'm still developing those skills. I'm not stagnating. But I have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And for me, a lot of that is making sure that the work is entertaining, that I can do it long term, that I don't dread waking up all the time and getting into my artwork. So try to think about what it is that you in particular need. Some people need loads of encouragement, and that's going to be one of the things you're going to need to seek. You're going to need to find people that can give you good, positive feedback on your work without burning those bridges, because if you're always seeking that positive feedback, you might kind of weigh on people over time, and that's something to be aware of as well. You don't ever want to try to be kind to yourself at the expense of other people. That seems like that just always backfires. But basically, that aside, try to take care of yourself as best you can, and try to think about what it is that you need in particular. Maybe you can reward yourself with certain things when you finish a sketchbook or when you finish a piece. But yeah, I could spend a lot of time here pulling this apart and giving suggestions, but really it's just a matter of try to know yourself, try to know what you need to do to take care of yourself and to make engaging with your art an easier, more than a difficult process. When you feel stuck, try a new medium. And this actually touches on the brush pens that I just mentioned. One of the reasons I bounce back and forth between things is to keep myself from feeling stuck. I have a lot of different things I juggle artistically, which is probably also done by my attention deficit, but it ensures that I never quite feel stuck. I always have things to bounce to. If I'm failing at painting, I have scripts, a story, a large ink piece, and a sketchbook piece all in process too. The sheer chances of failing at everything simultaneously are so minuscule, it's like a safety net that I've constructed to keep my head above water. So try bouncing to other things. If you feel like your ink work has been really hard to engage in recently, or your watercolor work feels so daunting because the last couple pieces have had mistakes and watercolor is so hard to fix, try bouncing to something else. In particular, if you work on mediums like watercolor, oil paint, or ink where a mistake is fairly permanent, maybe you need to have a sketchbook or a digital sketchbook that are allowing for ugly pieces. They're allowing for mistakes, or you only work with acrylic paint in that one because acrylic paint can be masked so easily if you make a mistake. If you are struggling because you're working with media that is permanent, then you probably need a backup media that's not. You need something that's a little bit more malleable, a little bit less stressful. Maybe the price of the oil paint stresses you out. Well, then work with pencil and ink with other things, because the price of those is just so incomparably small when it comes to oil painting. So we all need to think about that. But I love bouncing around on media. It makes me less stressed, and it also gives me a backup if something starts to go wrong. Always go back to what got you excited in the first place. This can be inspirations, things that get you excited about making artwork. For a lot of people, this is going to be books, TV shows, video games. It could be, anything that got you excited about your artwork. It can be what got you into drawing and painting, creating in the first place. For me, a lot of that inspiration is exploration. I know inspiration and exploration sound very similar there, but I've told this story several times, but my dad used to come back from his military trips in Asia, and he would bring back drawings and sketchbooks from the jungles. And that's part of why I got into art in the first place, is art was a means of transporting me to a different place, and it was a means of recording the amazing, cool things in the world around me. That got me started. Now, that's evolved into drawing dinosaurs and weird little, fantasy scenes and stuff like that, but it comes from that same place. I always work with creatures because I love them, and I try to work with environments even though landscapes are really stressful for me, because there's something about being transported to a different place. So go back to the things that are exciting to you, the things that got you into the media in the first place. And maybe if this was a video game, go pull that old video game out and play it. If it is a movie, go watch that movie again. If it's the Lord of the Rings series, because that's maybe the best best movie set ever made, go back and watch them again. And of course, watch the extended editions, because you're not a terrible person, and you definitely want to give Peter Jackson all of the time and energy that you could possibly give to someone. But go and watch those again, because they are wonderful and they're so exciting. And if you don't enjoy them, I really hope that at some point you will, because my goodness, the amount of joy that the extended Lord of the Rings movies have brought me over the years is tremendous. And I am so excited for the possibility of a 25th anniversary edition that might be coming out soonish, please. But go back to what got you excited in the first place. You can tell by my voice, by the excitement in my voice, that is what it is for me. The Lord of the Rings does that. We are moving through the Lord of the Rings again. We are halfway through the Return of the King movie right now, and kind of at that awkward stage where it's like, we need to sit down and finish it, but when we sit down, we have to watch it all the way through the end, which means we need to sit down for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And when you have two busy lives and then a 4.5-year-old running around all the time, finding 2 to 2.5 hours to sit down and watch a movie is difficult. The last thing I want to touch on today, and by all means, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just my ramblings for close to a half an hour about these topics. Create for no other reason than the fact that you want to. So this might be one of the most powerful things you can do if you are struggling to manage your need to create. Maybe you are throwing on all of these extra expectations, these ideas about what your art needs to be. Well, put all of that to the side for a little while. Make things for you, and don't share them. And start them without the idea that you will share them. Now, there's nothing wrong with sharing them eventually, but start that creation process without the idea that you will share them. Make the things that you want to. Your needs, your desires to create are valid, and your need to create is one of those valid components of you as a human being. You don't have to make things with purpose outside of just taking care of yourself. So sit down and make things that you want to make. Make things just for yourself. Again, if lists are beneficial for you, sit down with a little sticky note or a side of your sketchbook and just write out what are the things that you really like making. And then do them. Set that time aside like we talked about earlier, and make sure that you make things for you. You make things because you want to. This might be a little bit more difficult if you are currently working as an artist in some capacity and you have pieces that you have to deliver, but I would wager that in those scenarios, it might be even more important. For me, a lot of this is I like drawing monsters and ugly things. I like drawing in ink. I know that it's probably not quite as productive when I'm looking at getting into galleries and things like that for my oil paintings, but ink is fun. It's enjoyable. And frankly, a lot of people watching these videos and these podcasts have really enjoyed the ink work. And so that is encouraging to me. But even without that, ink's fun for me. And so I put time into it. The brush pens have probably, again, not been the most productive if I'm looking at it from a business angle, but they're enjoyable. I work on them for just me. I work on a lot of things that I record for video content. And I also have a sketchbook that I work on at the dining room table daily that I don't really share. I'll probably share when I finish it and do a sketchbook tour, but as of right now, I'm not taking pictures of everything. I'm not recording everything in there and sharing it. It's for me, because the process is fun. Now, I do occasionally finish a piece in that thing and go, dang it, I wish I would have recorded that. This turned out well. But that's just part of the situation. I don't really know that there's a solution to that other than record everything I do, and that seems really overburdensome. So make sure that you take time to do things that you want to do. Understand that it's beneficial for your overall artistic well-being, and it's also beneficial for whatever professional level things you want to do at some point. If you want to be a professional oil painter, your life will probably be better if some of your time is spent doing other things, because that will keep your excitement high, it will keep your skills developing, and the things that you learn from other media are also really, really important. So make sure that you're creating things for you. You're creating things that bring you happiness, you're creating things that bring you joy. And, if they end up being things that you want to share, things that you could sell, or things that you could work from for commissions and in a general capacity later on, then fine. But don't go into it with that intention. Just go into it knowing that this is like self-therapy. This is you taking care of yourself, creating the things you want, drawing mushrooms, drawing weird furry characters, drawing new races for a sci-fi novel that you might write at some point. Those things are important, and they're a good form of self-care. Well, as always, thank you for listening. This has been a non-exhaustive list of different ways that you can manage the need to create. I would love to hear from y'all in the comments below about the ones that either resonated with you best, or more importantly, the ones that I left off the list. When I was putting this together, I took some off because I didn't want it to be ridiculously long, and at the same time, I'm only one human. I put research into these, I think about my students, I think about myself. Sometimes I reach out to people and talk to them, but I'm never going to hit everything. So if there are other things that are important to you or you have discovered, please leave them in the comments below. It's beneficial to other people reading them, and it's beneficial to me too, to have better and further context when I make my next podcast or my next video. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.